Hi, I'm Bailey. At the age of 25, I lost my father. He had fought a long battle with cancer, and I couldn't help him apart from sending him some money which he already had enough of. I worked a busy job in Argentina after I moved from New Portland, Maine. Life in Maine was pretty quiet, and I'd go on little hiking trips with my dad as a little girl. He was a strict man who upheld his values at all costs. This way of his life made us distant as I grew older. He'd punish me for cheating on my tests. If he ever found out, by locking me in a dark room for a whole day until I promised I'd never do so again. He'd starve the farm dog for misbehaving if it ever hurt an animal. He was the definition of an old-school strict father. I appreciated his need to instill honesty in me, but I wasn't in agreement with the harsh ways he executed his will on everyone around. So when I was capable enough, I left. He'd send me letters of daily lessons to learn every other weekend. I'd read them and think about him. He'd tell me to be fearless, honest, good person, even if it meant sacrifice. I tried my best. So when my ma called me about his passing, I was taken back.
Bailey, dear, I need you to come home quickly. Can you take a few days off work?
Ma, what happened? You sound worried.
Bailey.
My mother's voice worried me to no end, but she didn't have to say what had happened. I already knew. Dad had passed and his battle was finally over.
I have so much to do here. Can you come home and help?
She asked so soberly that I thought she was faking it. Grief can harness itself in different ways. I cried my heart out that day and quickly booked my flight to Maine. There, the old trees and some new buildings welcomed me as I made my way to our home. Dad's farm was pretty successful still. I said hello to a few cows and the new farm dog on the way inside. As soon as I crossed over from the doorway, I bumped into my Aunt Kathy. Aunt Kathy was Dad's only living relative apart from Uncle Ron. She was his sister.
Oh dear, you're back. I'm so sorry. I wish I could have been around. I heard he suffered quite a bit.
I know, it's okay. He's at peace now. When did you get here? Aunt Kathy had moved away after getting married. She lived in Chicago at the time. She was one of the nicest people I had the chance to grow up around when she was still in Maine. We'd frequently visit her home down the street, and she'd make us some of the best steak I've ever eaten. It hurt when she moved to practice law in the big city, but I understand back then, like I understand now. Seeing her old face brought me some comfort. I needed that. Look, I know this is a moment's grieving, but I need you to listen to me very carefully. Okay. What is it, Aunt Kathy? He's instilled his will to me. There are things in there I can't read aloud to everyone just yet. I need you to trust me. I don't understand. If he's left you the will, shouldn't we all discuss it at once? Ideally, we would discuss it after everyone's grieved a little bit, but I'd say you should meet your mom and Ron first. It'll change your mind. She left me with that curious thought. I was a bit numb at the time. I've heard it takes a while for people to really soak in the absence of a person. Also, I detached from Dad in the years I spent away. I felt the same when I met Aunt Kathy. It looked like she was numb and detached too. Inside, I met with my mother, who oddly looked quite all right. She was away from a room full of people with Uncle Ron in the kitchen. They had a cup of tea each and were holding hands talking something over. Hey!
Oh, hey, sweet pea.
She jerked her hand away from Uncle Ron's as if she was caught off guard. I didn't pay much attention to it then because I thought he was just there helping her grieve. She wrapped her arms around me, and I felt the warm presence of the person I'd known for so long.
How was the flight?
It was all right. Argentina was a bit too hot this time of year.
Oh, I get it.
Say hi to Ron. He's been here a while now.
Hey, kiddo. All grown up now, aren't you?
Yeah, thanks for being around through those things. I know Dad appreciates it.
Oh, I'm sure he doesn't, but I did what I had to do.
He and Uncle Ron had a sore relationship. Some land settlement issues a year ago split them apart. Aunt Kathy wanted no part of the fight, so she married and moved away from them. Later, Dad set up his home away from Ron and got married and had me, their only child. I'd seen some pretty intense fights between the two brothers. Growing up, I was scared of Uncle Ron because he was big and always carried a shotgun around. He said it was for safety reasons, but I wouldn't trust him. He'd gotten into plenty of bar fights, and Dad and Aunt Kathy had to get him out of jail with what little connections they did have. Now he was back in the house. I wondered when Mom and he got so close. You want to have some tea? That day was spent reminiscing Dad's old memories and crying in our room quietly. Once the guests had left, I walked back into my room and the two of them stayed in the kitchen. When I went to check on them later, they moved away too. I figured they'd gone out without telling me to figure things out. Meanwhile, Aunt Kathy's statement about the will had me so confused. What did she mean? Why was she being so strangely quiet about it? I decided not to overthink it. Once the idea of his passing hit me, I had a lot of crying to do in my room. Aunt Kathy later walked over to my door and gave me a gentle knock. It's open, I said, sniffing my tears and wiping my face as quickly as I could. Is this a bad time? No, please come in, sit. Okay. How are you holding up? I'm doing all right. How about you? Oh, I don't know. Me and your dad, we kinda drifted apart. Happens to siblings when they move far away. Speaking of which, have you seen Ron? I've not seen him all day. Did he and Sylvia come back? No, I think they left sometime early this morning. I haven't seen or heard from them since either. Why? Interesting. Has Ron been around Sylvia for a while now? Mom kept telling me how he would take out time to visit Dad and her every day. Apparently, he'd been really helpful through those tough times. It's odd. I haven't seen his wife Hannah around at all. Where is she? Oh, so you don't know? Don't know what? Honey, he and Hannah got divorced a year ago. I think it was around the time your dad's diagnosis was finalized. What? Whoa. When did you find out? Your dad told me on a call when he could still talk, all right? Apparently Ron started showing up to their place a lot more after the divorce. Makes one wonder. Wonder what? Oh, nothing. Come on, let's go. We have to book a car for your father to be carried in. My friend has an agency here. Let's go talk to them. My town was pretty small. Word traveled fast from one corner of it to another. I and Aunt Kathy decided to get going to get a hearse for Dad's final travels. The house had been empty since everyone left. People from around the town had come to pay their respects earlier and say a kind word to Mom. We took a car to the agency that could provide us with a coffin and a hearse. Aunt Kathy happened to know the owner from way back, so we hoped we could get some kind of discount. The place just happened to be close to the intersection which the courthouse is on. When we got there, we found a possible clue to where my mom and Uncle Ron had disappeared early on.
Oh, hello, Kathy. How long has it been?
Feels like a century now, Carl. Aunt Kathy smiled as she embraced her old friend. Carl was a man in his mid-40s. He looked like he had been in business for a while. Kathy told me how he had inherited the business from his father, and they were one of the few who did what they did in the town.
I heard about it. I wish I could have come to your place to talk to you personally, but the business keeps me busy.
It's okay, I understand. I was gonna come here to talk one day or another anyway. I'll need some help.
Course, I'm always here. Hey, speaking of which, where's the little one? Did she come back?
You mean his daughter? She's not little anymore. She's right here, she said, pointing to me. I didn't know Carl and felt awkward smiling at him as he looked at me in amazement. Time passes quickly when you don't see someone for a while.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize. Look at you all grown up. I'm so sorry for your loss.
It's okay. Thank you. I'm Bailey.
Oh, yes, Bailey. I remember your name now. Hey, that reminds me. Why didn't your mom come here and talk to me when they were around earlier?
Mom came around here? When?
This morning. It was her and your dad's brother, I think. Ron, is it? Looks like him for sure. I saw the two pass by the shop. In fact, That's when I found out about your father's passing. I figured they'd come and talk to me when they were ready, but then they were gone.
I see. Well, I suppose they were busy making other arrangements. Forget about that now, Carl. Can we get started?
Sure, but I was just wondering. Maybe you want to ask Sylvia and Ron first. What if they already made the arrangements with someone else? You don't want two of each now, would you?
Not unless I pass two before midnight. Aunt Kathy laughed as she pulled out her phone. She dialed Mom, but she didn't respond. Then she dialed Uncle Ron, and he didn't pick up either. It was getting really strange now. What were the two of them up to? At first I thought it was all right, but now I was starting to get confused and suspicious. I could see Aunt Kathy had assumptions of her own, but she was keeping them to herself. Regardless of that, we picked a car and a coffin and asked Carl to keep them for us for a day. We went back home to see that Mom and Ron still had not come back. It was so weird. Where have they been? I fixed myself and Aunt Kathy some coffee and snacks. We sat down on the table, and just then, Mom and Uncle Ron made their grand entrance after being gone all day. Hello? The two of them walked very close together as they approached us in the kitchen. I didn't know why, but it almost seemed like Mom was excited to be there. Ron, too, had a weird, ecstatic feel to his walk as they walked towards us. Where have you two been? The whole day's over and we have so many arrangements to make. Where did you disappear to at such a crucial time? We went to make some arrangements of our own, you could say. What? We went to Ron's, actually, to spend some time together. And we have some news to give you two. What news? Mom grabbed Uncle Ron's hand and crossed her fingers with his as they stood before us. I felt oddly disgusted knowing what was about to come. Her and him? Really? How could I even imagine? We got married, and I would like to live together at Ron's place now. What? Mom, it's barely been a day since Dad passed. What are you even saying? I know this might be a lot to take in, but I know you'll be happy for us. You've always been a supportive daughter. Supportive? What do you think you're saying to me right now? He's not even been buried yet, and you've already picked a new husband? The least you could have done is wait for some time. And Uncle Ron? His brother? Really, Mom? I can't say I'm surprised. You two need to watch your mouths. Ron spoke as if he had any control of the situation. Suddenly, the whole thing started making sense to me. This was a complete setup. In the morning when Carl saw them, they were going to the courthouse to get married. Why? Was it because Ron wanted Dad's share of land and getting married to his wife would give him access to it? Or did they just happen to fall in love as soon as Dad passed away? That made very little sense. Looked like Kathy knew what was going on way before I pieced it all together. You really think you're in the capacity to order us around, you big buffoon? You don't get to talk to me like that. I provided for this family when they needed me. Where were you? Me? I was at home, not seducing my brother's wife, you know, like normal people. Kathy, you don't get to be all up in our business like this. And he didn't seduce me. It just happened. Oh, of course, it just happened. It's like when lightning strikes, isn't it? Just happened. And when exactly did this happen again? Yesterday? The two of them were speechless. They had no answer to that question. How could they? Everyone knew what was going on by then. Ron and Mom had probably started their affair when Dad was still sick. God knows if it had been going on for even longer than that. Clearly more than a couple of months had passed since they were together. I just averted my eyes away from them. I couldn't see them standing there holding hands like unashamed idiots. Really, Bailey? You're not even going to look at us? Is that how terrible we are? Mom, I honestly don't want to talk to you right now. This is way too much for me, especially after I just came home yesterday to a father who's no longer there. Oh, of course. So the mother has to suffer then. That's who I'm supposed to be. The sad widow? No. I want to be happy. I deserve to be happy. Your father was a boring man, and you have no idea what it was like taking care of him when he was sick. If it wasn't for Ron, I would have collapsed on myself. a boring man. Dad loved you. More than he even loved me, it felt like. He'd buy you flowers and gifts every day, and he'd keep recording songs on that dumb old radio so you two could listen to them together. You were the only person he wasn't harsh to. What are you talking about? Nonsense. I wanted a thrill from him. All that romance dies out when you have to care for someone 24/7. I couldn't stand looking at him being helpless this whole last year. Hell, I'd hope he died so I could be free finally and take a breath. That's enough. You don't get to badmouth him. He just passed. Oh Lord, I didn't expect all of this to happen so soon. I knew something was up with the two of you, but getting to it so quickly, you have no shame. You stay out of it. This is between me and my family. I'm not your family. Keep your voice down, little girl, before I crush you. That was it. I wanted to throw things around at him and Mom. I used to be scared of him, but now that I was all grown up, I saw how little he really felt. I was no longer scared of his demeanor, and I was full of anger at the time. We had a long shouting match that must have gone on for an hour before he and Mom finally left the house to go to his. Mom asked Auntie Kathy to read us his will and finish things up so they could finish moving into his house from here. I felt terribly betrayed by my mother. She didn't talk to me. She didn't ask me. Didn't even consider how I felt about this whole thing. I know being a widow is hard, but if she'd taken her time talking to me, I could have accepted this. But to just get to it, and with Uncle Ron, the man was a walking steam engine. He's always been the one to get in trouble. How was she expecting a happy family from him? It had been 3 days since Dad passed, and about 2 since Ron and Mom walked away from the house. I got a sudden call from my mother. She was screeching and crying in her high-pitched voice. I couldn't even make out the words for a while. You'll help us, won't you, darling? You love me, right? Mom, what do you want? The money, Bailey! All the money, all the land, give it to us now. Will you just relax and talk to me like a normal person? Don't try to play me. You know what I'm talking about. Look, honey, you have a great job in Argentina, right? You're well fed, well adjusted. You don't need any of this money, do you? Just let us have it. We can be happy with it. Put it to good use. Did Dad leave it all to me? Yes, he left you everything and me nothing. And you say he loved me? Is this what love looks like to you? Well, maybe he knew what you and Ron were up to this whole time. Maybe he wasn't as helpless as you thought he was. Don't talk back to your mother. I heard Ron in the background. Soon, heavy footsteps followed, and Ron seemed to snatch the phone away from Mom's hand. Listen here, you little goon. I'll have all the land your dad left you, all right? So either you give it to me or... Or what, Ron? You'll get drunk and go to jail again? You married Mom for Dad's land, and I can already tell. If you think you can intimidate me, you're wrong. I don't even care about the money or the land. For all I know, I'd burn it in front of you two rather than let you have it. I cut off the phone call before the two of them could get another word in. I turned around to find Auntie Kathy walking into my room. She decided to stay with me for a couple of days as long as I was in town. I figured she heard all the commotion and came to check on me. Tears slowly dripped down my face as she gently walked and sat down next to me. So you've heard? I shook my head to say yes, but I didn't really speak. I sent them the will. Had it hand delivered. I suppose they didn't like what they had to read. Mom said he left everything to me. Is that true? Yes and no. You will have everything, though. I don't understand. You can read the will later when you've settled down a bit. But the gist of it is, you'll have to relax and hear me out peacefully for this. It's a lot to take in. Okay. Basically, your dad had some hidden assets. Some land over in Iowa that he told no one about. That and this land combined could give you about $25 million in inheritance. What? I was blown away by the sheer scale of the figure. I knew our land at home was worth quite a bit, but he had hidden assets? How? I had no clue. Yeah, and he wrote in his will that if his wife, your mom, was to remarry within a month of his death, then you would get all the money. If not, it would be split. Looks like he knew about all of this. He made changes in the will with me months after he'd originally crafted it. So he's left them nothing. No. He's got a couple of cows for Ron. I suppose that's not too bad. Now I finally understood why Mom was so furious at me. It was just like Dad to set up a loyalty test even in his passing. He must have seen this coming. If only Mom had waited a bit longer and not shamelessly married Uncle Ron just about the same day he died, she could have had half of all the money. But after all that, I wanted her to do nothing with it. I eventually sold both properties and donated several million to cancer relief charities. Then I flew back to Argentina and settled down there for good. I haven't heard from Ron or Mom in a while, and I don't want to.